You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about how the little things we do every day, the habits we don't even notice, can sneak up on us and change everything. Especially when it comes to our memory. I've seen it happen, and it's a tough road when that starts to slip away. So today, I want to sit down with you, maybe over a warm cup of tea, and talk about something that's been on my mind, Alzheimer's. It's a big word, a scary one, but there's a lot we can do about it if we know what's what. We're going to dig into what causes it, how some everyday choices might put us at risk, and best of all, some simple steps to keep our minds sharp. Stick with me till the end, because I've got practical tips that could make a real difference for you and the folks you care about. Now, if you find this handy, I'd be mighty grateful if you tap that like button. It helps spread these bits of wisdom to others who might need them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button, flip on the bell too, so you don't miss a thing. Oh, and drop a 1 in the comments if you're nodding along, or a 0 if I'm off track. I can handle it. Let's start with what this Alzheimer's business is all about, because it's more than just forgetting where you parked the car. It's a condition that creeps in and steals memories, big ones, small ones, the kind that tie your life together. I think about my old pal Henry from down in Texas. He's 87 now, and a few years back, things started going fuzzy for him. At first, it was little stuff, like forgetting a name or losing his keys. But it got worse. One day, he wandered off from his porch in the middle of a sunny afternoon. His daughter, Jenny, stepped inside to grab some lemonade, and when she came back, he was gone. 2 days they looked for him, 2 long, heart-wrenching days, until he shuffled back home, looking like he'd been through the ringer, hungry and confused. Couldn't even say where he'd been. Broke Jenny's heart, and she swore she'd never let him out of her sight again. That's what Alzheimer's can do. It's not just tough on the person, but on everyone around them. And the numbers are climbing. Millions are dealing with it, and it's only going to get bigger unless we figure out how to stop it. So what's behind it? Well, it's got to do with our brains and how they change over time. There's this protein, amyloid beta, they call it, that's usually harmless, but as we get older, it can turn toxic. It starts piling up, forming these sticky plaques that gum up the works, messing with how our brain cells talk to each other. Then there's another troublemaker, tau protein. When it gets all tangled up, it makes these knots inside the cells, and that just adds to the chaos. Those plaques and tangles? They're the culprits that slowly chip away at memory and thinking, until folks can't manage on their own anymore. It's a rough deal, and it's why we've got to pay attention to what's feeding it, or better yet, what we can do to keep it at bay. Now, let's get into the meat of it. What's causing this Alzheimer's mess in the first place? I've been around long enough to know that sometimes the things we think are good for us can turn around and bite us if we're not careful. And that's the tricky part. Researchers have pinned down 6 big culprits that can nudge us closer to trouble, and some of them might surprise you. Thing is, once Alzheimer's digs in, it's a one-way street. The damage is done. That's why knowing what sets it off, and how to dodge it, is worth more than gold. So, let's walk through these causes together, because understanding them is the first step to keeping our heads clear. First up, skipping breakfast. Sounds harmless, right? I used to rush out the door with just a coffee in hand, thinking I'd be fine. But a study out of Japan, followed over 500 folks my age for years, found that skipping that morning meal can jack up your Alzheimer's risk 4 times over. 4 times. They figure it's because your brain's not getting the fuel it needs to start the day right. Without it, things start breaking down faster, like a car running on fumes. I've seen it with my own eyes too. My neighbor Clara, she'd skip breakfast to save time, and over the years, her memory just faded quicker than it should have. Makes you think twice about grabbing that toast, doesn't it? Then there's snacking too much. I love a good handful of chips as much as the next guy, but the same study said folks who snack all the time, especially on fatty stuff, bump their risk up by nearly 3 times. All that grease pumps cholesterol into your blood, and that feeds those amyloid plaques we talked about. It's like pouring sludge into your engine. Eventually it clogs up. I used to munch through the afternoon without a care, but now I'm wondering if those little treats were costing me more than I knew. Next, too much salt. I'll admit, I've always been a sucker for a salty fry or a well-seasoned steak. But overdoing it, say, 2.5 times the risk, according to the numbers, can hurt the blood vessels in your brain. High blood pressure kicks in, parts of your mind shrink, and that's a straight path to trouble. It's not about cutting salt out completely, just easing up a bit. Took me a while to shake that habit, but it's worth it for the long haul. And here's one that threw me for a loop: going too light with your diet. You'd think eating less would keep you spry, but if you overdo it, you might miss out on stuff your brain needs. Take my cousin Mary, she's only 50, but she went all in on a strict veggie diet years back. No meat, no dairy, nothing. Last year, she started forgetting things, big things, like turning off the stove. Docs found out she was low on vitamin B12, and that was eating away at her memory way too young. She's fighting it now, but it's a wake-up call. A light diet's fine if it's balanced, but starve your brain of the good stuff, and you're asking for problems. Makes you wonder what else we're doing that seems smart but isn't. Let's keep rolling with these causes, because there's more to unpack, and it's stuff that hits close to home. The next one's about vitamin D, or rather, not getting enough of it. I used to think sunshine was just for feeling good, but turns out it's a big deal for your brain, too. Some folks down in Australia dug into this with a huge study, over 250,000 people, and what they found stopped me in my tracks. They reckon if you get your vitamin D levels up where they ought to be, you could dodge Alzheimer's in a way that'd knock out nearly double the cases we see now. That's wild. It's not just about strong bones. Vitamin D helps your brain cells grow, keeps things firing right, and might even shield you from those plaques and tangles we talked about. I've taken to sitting out on my deck a bit more these days, soaking up the rays, because if it's that simple, why not give it a shot? Then there's sleep, too much of it, believe it or not. I've always loved a good nap, especially after a big lunch, but a study here in the States got me rethinking that. They watched over 1,000 folks around my age, average 81, for years, tracking how long they napped with little wrist gadgets. The ones snoozing more than an hour a day? Their Alzheimer's risk jumped up 40% compared to the short nappers. Now, I'm not saying a quick doze is bad. Heck, a 1-hour nap can sharpen you up, like some research out of China showed. But stretch it too long, and it's like letting junk build up in your brain, slowing down the parts that keep you awake and alert. I've caught myself nodding off longer than I meant to, and now I set a little timer, just enough rest, not too much. And here's one that'll make you scratch your head: being too clean. I've always kept a tidy house, but there's a catch if you overdo it. See, a little dirt's not the enemy. Those tiny bugs we live with help our immune system stay strong. Wipe them all out with too much bleach or antibiotics, and you're leaving your defenses weak. Some studies say that can speed up brain cell damage, paving the way for Alzheimer's. I think back to my buddy Frank. He was a germ nut, always scrubbing everything down. Over time, he started slipping, forgetting things he never used to. Docs wondered if his spotless place played a part. It's not about living in a mess, just letting a bit of nature stick around so your body can fight the real battles. These causes tie together in a funny way, don't they? It's all about balance, not too little, not too much, just enough to keep things humming. Breakfast keeps your brain fed, salt and snacks in check keep the pipes clear, and the right diet, sun, and sleep keep you firing on all cylinders. Even a little dirt's got its place. Makes me wonder how many times I've tipped the scales without knowing it, but the good news is we can nudge them back. Stick to the basics, and you're halfway there already. Now that we've got those causes laid out, it's worth knowing what to watch for, because spotting trouble early can make a world of difference. Alzheimer's doesn't just hit you out of nowhere, it sneaks up with little signs, and if you catch him, you've got a better shot at holding it off. Docs say there's 10 big red flags, but I'll boil it down to the ones I've seen pop up most. First, there's trouble picking up new things. Maybe you can't follow a recipe you used to whip up easy, or a new gadget feels like a puzzle you can't solve. Then there's shopping. Folks start forgetting what they came to the store for or get lost in aisles they've walked 100 times. Money stuff gets tricky too. Paying bills or figuring out change turns into a headache. And memory? It's not just losing your keys, it's blanking on what you talked about yesterday or where you were last week. I've watched it happen. My old fishing buddy Pete started slipping like that, and it wasn't long before he couldn't cast a line without help. If you see those signs around you, don't wait, get it checked. Early steps can slow the slide. Alright, so we know what's feeding Alzheimer's and how it shows up. Now let's talk about pushing back. The best part? It's not rocket science. It's stuff we can weave into our days without breaking a sweat. First off, eat more fish. I'm talking salmon, sardines, mackerel, good, hearty stuff loaded with omega-3s. Those fatty acids are like oil for your brain, keeping those plaques at bay and slowing things down. Studies back it up. Folks who eat fish a couple times a week tend to hold on to their memories longer. I've been grilling up some salmon on Fridays, and it's a treat I don't feel guilty about. Give it a try, it's tasty and does you good. Next, keep your mind moving. I've taken to playing Sudoku, those little number grids that make you think. It's like a workout for your head, and the research says it strengthens your brain, maybe even keeps Alzheimer's at arm's length. I keep a puzzle book by my chair, and it's a nice way to unwind while staying sharp. Doesn't have to be Sudoku, crosswords, card games, anything that gets the gears turning works just fine. Point is, don't let your mind sit idle, give it something to chew on. And don't sleep on keeping your weight in check. I've carried a few extra pounds in my time, but the numbers don't lie. Too much heft ups your Alzheimer's risk. It's not about starving yourself, just moving a bit and eating real food, like veggies and whole grains. I started walking around the block after supper, nothing fancy, and it keeps me steady. Ties right into the fish and the brain games, keeps your body and mind in tune. Funny how it all fits together, isn't it? A little tweak here, a little there, and you're building a wall against that memory thief. Makes me feel like I've got some say in how these years play out, and that's a comfort worth holding on to. Let's keep this train moving, because these habits we're talking about, they're like tools in your shed, simple but powerful if you use them right. Next up is sleep, and I don't mean just crashing whenever you feel like it. Quality sleep, 7, maybe 9 hours a night, does wonders for your brain. I used to burn the candle at both ends, staying up late with a book or the TV, thinking I'd catch up later. But studies say skimping on shut-eye lets that amyloid junk pile up in your head, and that's a straight ticket to Alzheimer's trouble. Now, I'm no saint about it. Sometimes I still nod off in my chair, but I try to stick to a rhythm. Lights out by 10, up with the sun. It's not just about feeling rested, it's about giving your brain a chance to clean house. You can feel the difference when you get it right, like your mind's had a good scrub. Then there's getting outside. I've always loved a bit of fresh air, but it turns out sunlight's more than just a mood lifter, it's a vitamin D factory, and that's gold for your noggin. Remember that Australia study? Enough D could cut Alzheimer's cases way down, helping your brain stay tough against those plaques and tangles. I make it a point to step out every day, maybe a stroll around the yard or just sitting by the window with my coffee. Doesn't take much, but it adds up. Used to know a gal, Ruth, who stayed cooped up all winter, and her memory took a hit faster than most. Sun's free, so why not soak it up when you can? And here's one close to my heart: keep your hobbies alive and your friends close. I've got a little woodworking bench in the garage, and tinkering with a birdhouse or a shelf keeps me humming. Studies say stuff like that, art, puzzles, even a book club, can slow down the memory fade. It's not just busy work, it's feeding your soul. Same goes for people. I meet up with my buddy Tom every week for coffee or a fishing trip, and it keeps me sharp. Being around folks, swapping stories, laughing a little, it's like medicine for your mind. Loneliness is a thief, and I've seen it dim too many lights. So, pick up that paintbrush, join a group, call a pal. It's fun, and it's fighting Alzheimer's without you even knowing it. All these pieces fit together like a quilt, don't they? Fish and sleep keep your brain fed and clean. Sunshine and hobbies keep it strong and happy. Weight's the thread that holds it steady. I think back to days when I'd let these slide, skipping meals, holding up indoors, letting friendships drift, and it's no wonder things felt foggy sometimes. But now, I'm piecing it back together, one little habit at a time. It's not about overhauling your whole life, just nudging it in the right direction. Makes me feel like I'm steering the ship, not just drifting along, and that's a feeling I wouldn't trade for anything. We're getting somewhere now, aren't we? All these habits, eating fish, keeping your mind busy, staying trim, sleeping right, soaking up sun, and holding on to hobbies and friends, they're like a recipe for keeping your memory humming along. It's funny how the little things add up, and I've been around long enough to see it play out. When you stitch them together, it's not just about dodging Alzheimer's, it's about living these years with a spark. I've had days where I let it all slide, figuring I'd be fine, but looking back, those were the times my head felt like it was wading through mud. Now I'm trying to keep it simple and steady, and it's paying off in ways I didn't expect. Take that fish bit, I've got it down to a routine now. Couple times a week, I'll fire up the grill, toss on some mackerel or salmon, and it's like a treat that's doing me a favor. Those omega-3s are working behind the scenes, keeping my brain from gumming up with that amyloid stuff. Same with the Sudoku. I keep a little book by my recliner, and it's become my evening wind down. Doesn't feel like work, just a quiet way to keep the gears turning. And the walks? Nothing big, just a loop around the neighborhood, but it keeps the pounds off and clears my head. I've noticed I'm sharper on days I stick to it, less fumbling for words, more quick on my feet. It's not magic, it's just giving your brain what it needs to stay in the game. Sleep's been a tougher nut to crack. I'm a night owl by nature. But I've been setting a bedtime, shutting off the lights, and letting my mind rest. Those studies about amyloid piling up when you don't sleep enough? They stuck with me. I don't want that junk clogging my head, so I'm giving it a fair shake. And getting outside, well, that's the easy one. I've got a spot on my porch where the sun hits just right, and I'll sit there with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up. Boosts my vitamin D, sure, but it's more than that. It lifts my spirits, keeps me feeling like I'm part of things. Then there's the woodworking and coffee with Tom. Those are my lifelines. Keeps me busy, keeps me connected. I've seen too many folks fade away when they stop reaching out, and I'm not about to let that happen. It all ties back to balance, doesn't it? Not too much, not too little, just enough to keep you steady. I think about my old friend Bill. He let a lot of this slip, stayed inside, skipped meals, didn't talk to folks much. His memory went south faster than it should have, and it was hard to watch. But me? I'm trying to hold the line, one day at a time. Fish on the plate, pencil on the puzzle, feet on the pavement, head on the pillow, sun on my face, and good company in my corner. It's not fancy, but it's working. Makes me feel like I've got a hand on the wheel, steering toward clearer days. And that's a comfort I can't put a price on. Here we are, winding down this little chat, and I've got to say, it feels good to lay it all out like this. We've covered a lot. What's behind Alzheimer's, those sneaky everyday habits that can trip us up, the warning signs to watch for, and a handful of ways to keep it at bay. It's not about scaring ourselves silly, it's about taking the reins and making these years count. I've seen too many folks let their memories slip away without a fight. And I reckon we've got better odds if we know what we're up against. Fish, brain games, steady weight, good sleep, sunshine, and a circle of pals. It's a simple list, but it's mighty. Stick with it, and you're not just dodging trouble, you're building a life that's sharp and full. I keep coming back to how it all fits together. That salmon on my grill isn't just supper, it's armor for my brain. The Sudoku isn't just passing time, it's keeping my mind limber. Walking the block, sleeping solid, sitting in the sun, carving a little shelf with Tom by my side, it's all part of the dance. I've had days where I skipped it all, thinking it didn't matter, but I felt the fog creep in. Now I'm holding the line, and it's like the clouds part a little more each time I do. You can feel it too, less haze, more clarity. It's not about perfection, it's about showing up for yourself, day after day, with these small moves that stack up big. So, what's the takeaway? For me, it's knowing I've got some say in how this plays out. Alzheimer's might be a tough customer, but it's not unbeatable, not if we're smart about it. I think about Henry, wandering off, or Bill, fading too fast, and it lights a fire under me to keep at it. Maybe you've got someone in mind too, someone you'd rather see laughing over coffee than lost in a blur. These habits aren't hard. Grill some fish, crack a puzzle, step outside, rest up, stay connected, and they're yours to grab. They're like a shield, and every time you use them, you're pushing back the shadows a little more. I hope you'll take this and run with it, tweak it to fit your own road. Maybe start with a fish supper this week, or dust off that crossword book. Whatever sticks with you, give it a whirl. I'd bet you'll notice the difference. And I'd love to hear how it goes. Drop a line in the comments with your own tricks or what you're trying out. It's not just for me, it's for everyone watching, building a little circle of folks looking out for each other. If this hit home, give it a like, and hit subscribe so we can keep swapping these nuggets of know-how. Thanks for sitting with me through this. It's been a real pleasure sharing it with you. Here's to keeping our minds bright and our days full. Catch you in the next one.